Hi, I'm Bobby Halton, and welcome to Trusted Voices. I'm here with Chief Alan Brunacini, often called the godfather of the American Fire Service, and we're coming to you live from the Chief's home. The Chief built a little fire station, and we thought it would be good to do kind of a throwback interview, just like we used to do when we were on the job back in the day. I think in some places, a lot of communities, probably, if you're a progressive community, you should probably be doing this. You should be sitting out in front of the fire station with the doors open. And the reason you do that is to invite the community in. It's, as the chief would tell you, it's their fire station. So we'll be interviewing the chief. We're going to be doing several segments. They're all rather short, but put them all together and we'll catch a good glimpse of the fire service from basically 1958 through to 2016. And we're going to talk a little bit about and beyond. So, Chief, we spoke a little bit about how you got involved in the fire service and your experiences in New York and Albuquerque and then on to Phoenix. And it's interesting because we're sitting in front of what is arguably the most beautiful fire truck in America, 1952 Mack Big Boy, that to say it's as pretty as the day it rolled off the assembly line would be a lie, because it's a lot prettier. There's a lot more detail that's been added to it. There's a great deal of artistic work that's gone into it. There's a tremendous amount of history behind this piece of equipment. And the chief literally rode this piece of equipment from his first day on the job all the way through to the rank of captain and until it was retired by the Phoenix Fire Department. Arguably.
Right? Yeah, I did about 10 years on it. Yeah.
10 years?
Yeah.
And now it sits at his home in his own fire station. So next time your wife gets mad at you about your I Love Me room where you have a few plaques and posters and things, say, well, that's nothing. I know a guy who built his own fire station and then multi-million-dollar fire truck. So tell us a little bit about the history of this particular rig. And then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the fire service today and maybe where we're going with rigs, because it's an interesting, this truck I think is significant.
As you mentioned, I joined the fire department in 1958, and I very early in my career applying for the job and all the kinds of things that you do. The headquarters fire station was Station 1, where this truck was housed and quartered, and it was Engine 1 during all the time that it was in service. And I walked into the station and I looked at the trucks, and I walked over to this truck. And I don't know why, and I can still remember the feeling. I said, someday I'm going to own that truck. And I mean, I hadn't seen that truck for like 7 minutes. And I said, and it was just kind of love at first sight, if you may.
Right. Been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're going through that right now. And it was, like I said, it was Engine 1. It operated with a squad company, a ladder company, and it had a hose wagon. It was actually a two-piece company. And there's a hose wagon that went with it in the process. So everywhere it went, it was you had a wagon and a pump, in effect. Right. And it was in the principal business district of Phoenix. And it was downtown Phoenix in the process. And after I went through the academy, I was assigned to Station 1, and I was a firefighter, and we rode the back of it, like we did in those days. And in those days, it was a six-man company, because they were all men in those days, yeah. And then when I got promoted to engineer, I was lucky because there was just some other promotions that went on, so I got to drive it. And then when I made captain, I was a captain on it for 4 or 5 years. Wow. So I worked on it for 10 or 11 years.
Wow.
Then later, I became when I was promoted to battalion chief, after a few years, I ended up parked right next to it in the process. So we're very familiar. It was in service from 52 to 72. It had 5 years in reserve, so 5 years after that, they surplused it like they did older pieces of equipment. And I bought it at a salvage auction and took it, and then took us 30 years to restore it. And here it is.
With Hoot, you and Hoot,
yeah,
Hoot Gibson.
And a really close friend of mine was a guy who was Robert Gibson. We call him Hoot Gibson. He was a deputy chief on the Phoenix Fire Department when he was in charge of our fleet. He was the fleet manager. And is just a terrific mechanic and metal guy. And his dad had a welding shop. So he was raised kind of as a metal worker in the process, and it's just a terrific mechanic. And we still hang out together. I see him twice a week. And his son, Wayne Gibson, is a automotive artist. He does silk screening, he does pinstriping, he gold leafed this truck, he does painting, he does metal finishing. So the family is very talented. And they were kind of the secret weapon on this thing. And what I did is I cleaned it. He fixed it and I cleaned it. But there's an enormous amount of cleaning, as you can imagine. And we took it down to bare metal. And for 30 years, every weekend I looked like I worked in a coal mine because you were just filthy. You know
I remember over the years coming to visit, 30 years coming to visit, and I remember seeing the frame in this garage.
Yeah, I know it.
Floors weren't done yet.
It was just a mess.
It was unbelievable. And 3 rip-off trucks, the cannibal trucks in the back.
There were some times when I would get underneath it and I would take a paper bag and I'd cut holes in it for my eyes just to keep all the junk off of it. And Hoot would look at me and think, somebody's going to come in here and shoot you. They're going to think you're a terrorist. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, and again, it was obviously now it was a classic vehicle. It's kind of the Cadillac. They say that this is the poor man's Aaron's Fox. And it's an L model Mack, and this is kind of an interesting model because they call it an LS21, which means it doesn't have a Mack engine, and it has a Hall Scott engine, and a lot of West Coast apparatus were powered by Hall Scott engines, which was a large gas marine engine. It's 1,000 cubic inch, 6-inch bore, 6-inch strokes. I mean, it's a huge engine. And I know that because we had a set of pistons made for it. And the hood on this truck is 11 inches longer than a regular Mack hood is. And they called them Big Macks. And they sold them mostly to big cities. And they probably did a couple hundred a year that had different engines in them. Wow. And
well, as you walk around her, though, and you look at her, and you talked about having the hose wagon, she could put out 4,000 or 5,000 gallons a minute.
Yeah. Downtown in Phoenix has a terrific water system, water supply and delivery system, and you'd hook to a hydrant and you could pump. If you put Siameses and Ys on it, you could pump 6 or 8 or 10 hose lines on the thing, and it would just pump like crazy. And you got this engine; it's just a huge engine, so it would just keep running. It's really a beautiful truck, though.
But what I love about her is there's no mission creep on this 52. In other words, that's an engine. It is designed to fight fire. You can reach everything. It's plumbed to take water. And
it's mechanical. It's mechanical. It's not. There's no technology in it. There's no diodes. There's no computers. Yeah, it's all. Yeah.
And so a question for you, and I think it's interesting to ask. I look at apparatus today. We were talking about it at breakfast. We're buying $1.5 million engines, and they seem to be 12 feet tall, and they have the ladders that come down on platforms, and I think that they're wonderful. Technologically, they're amazing what they can do, but they're so big, and they seem to be designed to do so much more than just deliver water nowadays. I mean, we're even building them with cabs to do patient transport today. And I wonder if that mission creep is being reflected in our apparatus, if we're reverse engineering our rigs to kind of mirror some of the confusion confusion's probably not the right word, but maybe some of the complexities that are in the fire service today. I mean, the fire service in 52 was a little more straightforward. You had a fire, you called the fire department. It was a little more straightforward operation than it is today.
I think it was a lot more straightforward than it is today. We were also at breakfast talking about the development now of smaller EMS vehicles.
Right.
And you mentioned it, and that now it's getting to be more and more common, is that there's a smaller vehicle, a la LA, Southern California
Squad. Mini pumpers.
And that was the old emergency looking thing. And now they're calling them assessment units or whatever they call them, and they're kind of the forward piece of EMS that probably handles the vast majority of EMS activities in the process. And I don't know if that wouldn't apply on the fire side. is I know we developed, and I think we were certainly among the original prototypes of ladder tenders. Is when we got into EMS, we were using ladder companies to deliver emergency medical services. Well, that's a lot of wear and tear on a big, expensive, complicated vehicle. So somebody in the food chain figured out, let's build a smaller vehicle, just what we're talking about in EMS. And for I think we had 14 or 15 ladders in Phoenix, and we ended up with that many ladder tenders. And it was interesting. I called the budget director and I said, I want to buy an alternative vehicle for our ladders. And she says, well, tell me about it. I said, a ladder, and I may be off a little bit, maybe a lot, but I think I'm pretty close. I said, a ladder is like $17 a mile. A ladder tender is $2.10 a mile. She said, buy 3, and hung up.
Yeah, right.
I'm thinking, wow, that took some real salesmanship on my part.
Right.
And that was kind of the story, though. And once we got them, people were a little, because, if you were a ladder company, you were used to having a regular ladder. Senior aerial, Sure. And then they start playing what if. Well, what if we get and what if we don't and all that business. Well, once they started using them, they got used to them, and they saw how much utility value they had. They were taking them on fires. And they said, we can get in places with that tender that we couldn't get with a big ladder. It makes us quicker, we're more agile, and we can take the ground ladders off the engines and still do access. And we thought, wow. So I want to say 85 or 90% of the miles we put on a ladder company, they actually wrote in a ladder tender in the thing. Wow. Yeah, I would hope, and you said it, as you look at how complicated and how large those vehicles are, they're so large. You wonder how they place apparatus. In other words, a huge issue in incident management is apparatus placement. Some of them, I don't know how you drive by them even. In other words, it almost take up the whole lane. Well, I think there's a huge value in cross-pollinating the concept because there's an idea in it. But when you take it home, you got to use your resources in your system with your city and your hazards and in other words, we don't have a lot of snowplows in Phoenix. They probably don't have a lot of heat blizzards in Minneapolis, right. and so on. I mean, you could just translate that in any way you want to create the permutations of it, But but I think the apparatus thing is there some place where you could exchange? I'm not saying this very well. Technology for size. Could we solve some of this size issues with better technology,
or system
or systems, or the operating guidelines that you use to support that equipment. To say, and you go to FDIC and you walk around the floor and you look at the apparatus, you look at the hardware. Amazing. It's amazing. You can't even. I'm not much of a technologist, and some of it I look at. I'm wondering what do we? I don't even know what that is.
What does that do?
What does it do? Yeah. Where do you put that on? What part of your body do you put that on? Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I think it's great. I think the technology is a terrific development just in our culture today. But it's interesting to look at.
Well, I think that the firefighters need to speak up more and be more vocal. And these manufacturers, Pierce Corporation or whatever large manufacturer, they're looking for your input.
Yeah,
they're knocking the doors down.
They'll build whatever you want them to
right,
build.
They'll build whatever you want them to
That's
build.
right.
Come talk to them.
Write a spec.
Yeah,
just write a spec. It's a real bid on it.
Yeah, they're the most amicable people I've ever met, and all of them. I don't care whatever one you like, but if you don't give them the input, they got to go with what they.
I did a class the other day in Alabama. They're going to take our picture. Class picture, 3-day class. Got about 30 people in the class. Local fire department comes out with a brand new pumper. They're going to show off their new pumper. Beautiful piece of equipment. The captain opened the door, and the door was open, and I was visiting with him. And without exaggeration, the seat that he had been sitting on was about that wide, because the engine is in between the driver and the officer. Okay. And I said, how do you how do you operate in that crowded space? And he said, it's really a challenge. For the last 20 years that while I was here with Hoot, my partner here, we never bought a pumping machine that had an engine in the cab. It was either a rear engine, Hush, or then we got mid-engine. Manufacturers were putting the engine right behind the cab, which was a better weight distribution in the process. First of all, there was space. It was quieter. It was cooler. You could operate in that cab, and I think there's a place where technology can solve a whole set of problems in the process. And I wouldn't buy. And I said, don't buy another particularly engine company with an engine in the cab in the process, and they didn't in the process. And I mean, that was a pretty practical kind of thing.
I remember we had a discussion too, and a little piece on technology here, but I remember when we first started putting air packs into the seats. And I still, I know a lot of people like it, and they talk about being able to get out faster, but I still prefer them in the cabinets, because I thought it gave us a chance to reconnoiter, take a look around without the pack on. Yeah,
settle down.
Yeah, right. Rather, yeah. You once made a joke, if we put a catapult on the back of a guys would be lining up to be the guy in the catapult, throw them into the fire. But
quicker.
Yeah, get them in quicker. But I think that there's a lot to be said, I think, for comfort, safety, and I don't particularly want somebody taking off their seatbelt to put on their SCBA so that when they get there they can jump out of the rig. I don't know that those 2 or 3 seconds make that much of a critical difference. I would prefer people to have the team come together, make sure everybody knows what the assignment is, what their task is, that they're squared away, get a chance to look at each other rather than separating out, because the officer, he's not packed up when they arrive on scene.
We had an interesting experience because we had a before and after, because we had them in the seats, and we were concerned about seatbelt use, and just based on some of the experiences we had, we took them out and put them in the Campbell compartments on the outside, and everything that you just said we experienced. It was safer, it was quicker, we had a better beginning, the officer had better control. I think we were quicker ultimately because we had it together in a lot more deliberate kind of way. And of course the firefighters, when we did it, they were just tickled to death with a change, as you can imagine. And they said, we're basically going to burn down the whole city because you took the SCBAs out of the cab. And I said, well, maybe
children will die.
That's right, children will die. I said, well, basically when they rebuild it, we hope they sprinkle it. But life went on in the process, and I lived through maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 major changes where we were going to completely burn the city down.
Oh.
And so far, it's all here. You guys have been here for a couple of days. It's all here, isn't it? Yeah.
We'll talk about, in another segment, we're going to talk about your efforts to destroy the fire service.
Yeah, that's right. No,
which are well documented.
I'm still at it.
Right,
I hope I at it for a long time.
Yeah, let's keep going. Yeah,
that's right.
Lots more to destroy.
That's right. No,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.